yes, I'm doing what I'm doing right now, and maybe I'm really enjoying it. But where do I want to be in 5 years, in 10 years? What does that look like? And sometimes they don't align.
Don't think about career move when you're desperate. Do it when you have a lot of energy and you get to look at your current situation objectively and think about how to align your value to your next move.
I'm going to say something really controversial. At the end of the day, you are just a number on a spreadsheet. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Our Tech Chronicles podcast. Today, we have another exciting episode for you all. We are actually on episode number 30, which is like a big achievement for us too. We are going to cover today, is it time for a change in your career? Should you switch roles, companies, or careers? So we'll talk through various aspects of have you ever felt being stuck in your career? Signs it might be time for a change. Lateral versus upward versus radical career moves. And finally, as always, we will talk about like some real life stories, lessons of our own. So before we start, quick icebreaker question for the three of us. Have you ever had a moment where one day that you felt like you are done with this job and you quit immediately?
I don't know whether I quit immediately, but I've had that feeling a few times. But to your point, I have felt that sometimes, what am I doing? Is this aligning with where I want to go? Change is difficult, but sometimes you get to that point where you think it's worth doing that change. So yes, to your question, I have felt like that.
Yeah, me too, Yuresh. Like, there was a point that I decided I want to quit no matter what. It was like inconsolable difference with my value and what the company expected of me. So at that moment, I decided I was going to quit. But of course, I took my sweet time to find the next place to move to.
Yeah, kind of like somewhere in between. I have felt that multiple times, but haven't really quit like on that same day. But on a couple of occasions, I actually did leave my job before I lined up like my next gig. But it wasn't like an overnight decision. I sat on it for a little bit.
That's brave.
All right. So with that, so maybe we'll talk about what had brought you to kind of feeling that you're stuck in the current role or the current job.
To me, obviously, many people leave the current role because of maybe burnout, higher pay, or they didn't like their boss. But for me, I've moved because of feeling that, I already accomplished what I wanted to do in my role and I could probably answer things in my sleep. Then I realized, okay, I think I need to look elsewhere. And my motto is like, if you feel like you're the king of the jungle where you are, there's really nothing more to do above. So that kind of intrigued me to look elsewhere.
Spot on. Meaning, I think the first thing, if I was looking at my changes, first one was probably boredom. I was not excited about the kind of work that I was doing or the company was doing, and it was then time for a change. And another one was more like growing opportunities. Like there were not too many, or it was too crowded, and so I think it was time for a change. I was younger as well. Then. The next one was more of an exciting new opportunity, where you're excited about this unknown challenge, right? And excited to pave your own path and define something new. That was like probably very adventurous of me, which I loved that I did. And various different reasons, actually. I'm going through all of them. And then the next one was probably looking for stability, right? Looking for more stability, more structure in the type of work I was doing, my growth path, new challenges, stuff like that, which I was not getting.
So yeah, between the two of you kind of covered like most of my situations too. Sometimes you don't feel like you're growing any further. You're not learning new stuff. You don't really feel like you're advancing your career. It's just running at a pace. In some situations, it has been you're not really happy with like your coworkers, or like it's like some uneasiness, or like even like the direction like the company is going. right? You kind of want to kind of take the leap and like see what else you can do or you might be able to do. So there's like definitely different feelings around, different ways to look at like whether you're kind of stuck in your current role. So with these signs, maybe we can talk about stories and lessons, but how have we approached some of the career moves, right? Maybe we can kind of talk through some of the approaches that we have taken, whether to decide whether to move or like, or like how to go about like moving.
One other reason that I personally felt to move on to a different role is the feeling that you could have done a better job looking at someone who is currently in that position. This is real true story, by the way. I mean, it's more like a jumbo gym kind of jump. It's not really a ladder move for me. But yeah, most of the time, in my past, I felt like I could have done a better job at someone who is not really doing a good job. So that was one. Other at the flip side, I've also admired people who have done an amazing job, and I wanted to aspire to be them. So I wanted to, move to that. And the other thing is sometimes we think about lateral move as something not good or underrated, but that's where some of my biggest change has occurred. Lateral move, not always vertical, because in fact I'm actually thinking about one right now. So when you do a lateral move, you get into a totally different group of people, and you expand your network, and you learn a lot of things. At the same time, you carry forward the knowledge of the previous domain that you left. It just keeps on adding as you do lateral move.
Let me go back a little to your question, Yuresh. So, what do you do now once you feel that way, right? For me, couple of things. Like one is when the case where I was feeling bored, the work didn't align with my interests. That was a case where I had to, once you start feeling bored, it's a slippery slope, right? So that was a case where I had to start doing something about it, and then I started actively applying and interviewing and whatnot. Then the next case where, the new shiny, I had this whole startup bug in me for a while. And the thing that made me think that way is I was in a very young company, like only like 60 people. But even then, as we were making changes to the code base, I used to admire those initial engineers of the architecture that they did, right? And I used to think, wow, would if I was in that situation, would I be able to architect something so that new people can come in and make it extend it and add these new features and completely change, business models and things like that? Because this young company was going through that change, but still they kept that core architecture in place, and I was really impressed by that. And so I used to always think, and then when an opportunity to join a even younger startup came my way, I was like, I have to do this because I would never know if I never do this, right? So it was a leap of faith, and I jumped and I did it, and I'm so glad I did. Gave me a lot of confidence in my career actually, because the buck stops with you. You have to make this change choices, right? So that was really good. But there are also cases where it's context, right? It's scenario, this different scenarios. Now I'm a little older. I have a family. I have a lot of stability, and now I'm also considering a change, right? And interestingly, I'm considering the lateral change purely because I love the company I work for. It's a really good company. It's just that I want a new challenge. I want a new challenge. I've been here for a while, and I want something new, surround myself with a new bunch of people, inject new energy, right? And learn something new. And when you're in a large company, you have that luxury of being able to do that.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
that is
I
a
was
take.
I was going to say that because I think depending on the company, there are these opportunities which are like broader. Even like at the start of my career, and Roshan, like we joined the same company at the same time, right? It was at the time, it was what like Visual C plus plus versus Java. It was almost like a coin flip, right? Everyone started as like software engineers, and we got divided into these two groups. Within the first week, I realized like I was on the Microsoft like the stack. I didn't like it, right? Like so, I switched to the Java stack, right? So there was an opportunity to do that. Like, but I'm kind of thinking back now, like what if like if I did not have that choice at the time, right? My first job, I would have felt like so miserable, right? And kind of thinking back at my career, like in most of the cases, I have been able to do like lateral moves. I have switched from, like, in one of the situations, one of the companies I worked for was a software product company, but they also had a consulting arm. Basically, you take the base product, basically customize it for various customers, right, or the clients. So I worked on both sides. So I started on the services side, I moved to the product side, and then I switched back to the services side, or the consulting side. In like some of the more recent jobs I have had, I have kind of experimented with like some of the big four consulting. There's like so many different verticals. So there's these industry verticals, technology verticals, and some of them, like, sometimes they have like a multi-dimensional type of like a field. So I've worked on like retail, I have worked on like SAP stack, or like different technology stacks. So I think like the lateral moves can be taken in like different contexts too, right? On like the opportunities. How about like some radical moves, right? Like in terms of you weren't really sure, but you took a chance. I know that, Roshan, you kind of talked about, joining a startup always has its own like risks. But any other scenarios that you can think of, Shan, in terms of like a radical move?
I truly admire you both because amongst the three of us, I'm probably the most risk averse person, even before I had family and children. So, you guys have ventured into so many radical moves, but for me, I think one of the worst decisions I've made was because the move I made was for a higher pay and a shiny title and a job role that I truly didn't believe, aligned with my skills. But I still jumped in because it was too good of a offer to pass on, right? I only lasted 9 months, by the way. So I joined this company. It's a big company, and from the get go, things started appearing that it is a kind of a toxic environment that I walked in. It's probably the department, not the whole company. But it didn't take me too long to realize this is not what I wanted to do in my life, in my career. So it took me a while to get out of there, but I ended up burning bridges there. But I didn't care, right? Because I knew at that point I tried and this is not what I want to do. So I made few other changes, but they're not too radical. But the one I'm currently thinking about could be a radical move. But to Roshan's point, I feel exactly the same way because currently I work for a company that I love. In fact, I'm a boomerang to the current company because I left the company and then came back and they were very happy to have me back. Now I feel like the company is so big and there will always be opportunities to grow. It'll be such a shame if if I had to leave the company for something else when there is opportunities all along in the current company.
Love hearing this story, Shan, right? It makes everything so real, right? But to your point, I think what you experience is sometimes very true to a lot of people. Sometimes you don't know, right? You interview well, you get excited, and then once you hit the ground running, you learn the situation. So your 9 months is actually good because I know some people who stayed a month and maybe 3 months even, right? And realize, hey, this is not working. So I think that's a good story to share. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of, I would say the most radical move I have done is going from like a full-time job to doing independent consulting. So one thing, you guys probably know this about me, I have never been a title chaser. I have cared least about the title. It has always been the type of work I do, right? I have never really paid attention to like the titles. With that led me to help me like to kind of make that move initially when I did it, right? Because if you purely talk from like stability, even income point of view, I took like a massive hit. But at the same time, like I would say like 99% of the time I do like stuff I really love doing now because I really pick and choose like what I need to do. So in terms of like radical move, I would call the most radical move is that. Another thing comes to mind. I don't necessarily think it was like such a radical move, but like when I was getting ready to move from Milwaukee to Chicago, so I found a job in Chicago while I was still living in Milwaukee, and I just decided that I'm going to continue to live in Milwaukee and like work for this company in Chicago. And this is like before everything got like super remote. So I used to hop on a train every day, early morning, which was like a big adjustment because I'm not a big morning person. Hop on a train early morning, commute to like Chicago, then like, take the train back in the evening. I did that for 3 months. But I used those 3 months to like apartment hunt, like in Chicago, basically.
Mm.
Like, so I had like enough time kind of moving to a new city. I wasn't in a rush to kind of find a place. Took my sweet time, looked at like 30 plus some different locations, and finally decided on something. So that was pretty interesting. One other thing I would say, again, like I would say like semi-radical. So I moved from one big four to another big four. So since we are not naming names, so from a ranking point of view, like the second company I joined ranks lower than the first one, purely from a big four aspect. So one of the holiday parties or something. So after I joined this second company, one of the partners of that company asked me like, why did you move from that company to us? I said, well, I really don't look at it as moving companies. I joined this team, right?
Mm.
Like the company came with it. I don't think he liked the answer, but that's what I said, and I really meant it. And that's exactly what I was thinking. Like when I moved, like, so it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like the company name or like the my designation, my title on paper hasn't really mattered. Like I've always kind of chased that role. So yeah, I've had like some moves like that based on that. So yeah, like, so we already kind of talked about some real life stories while kind of talking through like some of these topics. So maybe like we can talk about like some lessons learned, so that like it might help um, like our audience too, like on what to avoid in a situation like this, or when you get into like a decision.
A good one, Yuresh. I think when I was younger, little more emotional, right? At least now, I take a lot of time to like weigh the pros and cons. So I like writing stuff down. I do like a SWOT analysis. Okay. For example, as you probably know, I've mentioned this in the podcast as well. I changed roles from an architect into management, right? That was the change. And so I had to think a lot about that. The why was important to me, and so I did a full analysis of, okay, this is the good and the bad of changing this role. Similarly, I'm doing the same for this lateral change as well, to see whether this is really what I want to do, and the good outweighs the negative aspects. So I think it's important to do that, especially nowadays. The job market is, I'm guessing, still very competitive, right?
Mm.
So it's not like before where you do some good work and then there are like five companies waiting to hire you. It's so competitive. I think you have to know your why really well, I think, why do you want to do this change.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I do the same thing, like open an Excel sheet and put the plus and minus compare. But by the time I've already made up my mind, I just want to convince myself. But what really helped me was talking to someone close to you. Like we have a family friend here, to hear from a external point. Sometimes you're biased, right? You have a perception about the place you're moving or undecided. But that talking helped me quite a bit. And of course, Excel helps if you want to just put the financials like benefit and other things added, especially if you're getting some sort of stock options and stuff. I think it's important to kind of weigh that there. But there are intangibles that we need to think about: what technology, what exposure we are getting. So that kind of helped me. And again, I sound like a broken record, but don't leave a job just because you're feeling bored. Roshan, I'm telling you, right? I mean, of course, I think that's what you meant, is that explore in your current company. Talk to your boss saying that, hey, I feel, I need to be more challenged. Probably I'm looking elsewhere. I mean, fortunately, I've got a great boss who, I feel like my boss is like my friend, so I can talk about it. There's always great opportunities within the organization. That is, again, if you like the company that you're working for, right?
Mm.
And sometimes your immediate boss kind of makes or breaks that perception, right? I've gone through that in my life. Like, my boss could actually change my entire experience with the company. But it's only after I left the company I realized so many people would have taken me into their departments, like reached out. So many people reached out and say, hey, why did you suddenly leave? I mean, we would have loved to have you in our division. I felt like, looking back, I felt like maybe I could have done that, especially with the current company that I'm working for. Like, instead of jumping, I could have given them an opportunity, because right after I accepted the other job and I gave the notice, they said, "Why didn't you even bring this up?" Right? But it's all gone full circle.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, some of the lessons learned, I mean, this could be like a generational thing too, right? So when we started the career, the norm has been to stay there for a long time, right? So there's quite a bit of naiveness kind of built into that
Mm.
notion too, right? So one of the lessons I have learned is that I for sure have been naive enough to think that just because you are being loyal or you are kind of pouring your heart and soul into this job, like the company is going to take care of you. I'm going to say something really controversial. At the end of the day, you are just a number on a spreadsheet, right? So I have hardly ever come across like a company that'll do something just for the benefit of the employees. I mean, they do that, but at the same time, there's some kind of like a return to them for them too, right? Like it's hardly the case where they would make a decision just for purely to benefit like the employee. So you have to kind of keep that in mind, right? You have, I'm not saying like don't do your job well. As long as you are doing your job, like you should be really committed. But I think like you need to look after like yourself. So if in my experience, I have waited around like thinking that like, the tide would change, but it has not. So you're kind of waiting and waiting and then realizing that this is not going to work out, then you move. Over the years, I have kind of learned that the hard way, and like then like towards like as mature you get, it's easier for you to kind of make those decisions. So that's kind of like one of the lessons. And even in situations where I've had like issues with coworkers, it's there's like different ways to kind of deal with that, right? Like, I mean, you definitely have to take like a more diplomatic approach. Like you don't want to be the guy who that always complains, right? So handle those situations like more diplomatically, have like more one-on-one conversations versus like sending like an email to like 100 people about like the issues while deciding whether to like do a lateral move, like go to like move jobs to a different company. There's like a lot of things that like that you should do like to avoid, because like at the end of the day you don't want to burn bridges. Your network is like one of like the greatest commodities you have, like as you build your career. Those are like some of the lessons I have learned in the past, that I have made mistakes and I kind of advise on others. Anything else you guys want to add?
Maybe another thing just to add to that is, so you asked about, like, how do you decide, right? And so we talked about the spreadsheet and my pros and cons. Another one also, which I had to go through recently, is yes, I'm doing what I'm doing right now, and maybe I'm really enjoying it. But where do I want to be in 5 years, in 10 years? What does that look like? And sometimes they don't align, right? And so then you have to decide, okay, how do you, if that's your goal, how are you going to get there? What are the different avenues to get there? And you have to make a decision then, is do I stay with my current role, current company, or do I make a change? Do I change roles or change careers even sometimes, right? Let's say I'm in software and I want to be a farmer, right?
Yeah.
Right? Then what do you do? So I think that you got to think about that long term picture of your long term goal, and then decide how you want to get there. The longer you prolong it, the longer it's going to take to get there, or you may not even, right?
Yeah.
I think that's also important.
It's interesting, just to kind of add to this, right? Like I think historically, especially when you do like a full-time job, you're like too focused only on that, right? Like, and in most cases, a lot of people actually only, whether knowingly or unknowingly, like that becomes like your sole stream of income too. So there's this whole concept of I'm not going to say the whole word. It's basically called FU money. So what that means is like you are building like a reserve for a situation where if it really comes to that point where you are really stuck, you don't want to do this job anymore. It's not that you're quitting forever, but you want to take a break for 6 months, then you have that reserve to kind of dip into, so that while you figure things out, you can kind of dip into that reserve and then make a career move too, right? So I think it is important to kind of build that those parallel kind of income streams as you do your work, because a lot of things can change. Like you might want to leave and like join another company, and like you need to have like some backup, or like you're asked to leave, like, and then like you're under pressure. So that's something I would definitely advise on like a lot of people to look into, because I surely did not see things that way at the first half of my career. Eventually, like you kind of talk to people, learn things, and then you kind of understand these things. Yeah, yeah. One couple of more you have to add.
I
Okay,
was
go
gonna
ahead, go ahead.
say,
Yeah,
yeah, echo what you were saying. That's spot on. Like I was gonna say, don't think about career move when you're desperate, right? That's what you were saying. Do it when you have a lot of energy and you get to look at your current situation objectively and think about how to align your value to your next move. One radical move, Roshan, when you were talking about drastic move, I mean, this is the extreme case, and this is true case. Though my neighbor is a chief HR officer of a massive hospital chain, and guess what he did? He retired early when he was 61, and then he became a truck driver. He became a truck driver, and he was proudly telling that to me, and I was like, why? And he said, well, I love driving massive vehicles and I love going cross country. And this is like the match made in heaven for me. And I can, take my dog with me and drive cross country. So imagine that, right?
interesting.
The guy must have saved enough money, but now, I mean, he's thinking about his value and he doesn't think about how low or high the job is. And he made a move.
It's that satisfaction, right? I
Yeah,
love stories like that, right?
yeah.
Why I raise my hand, Yuresh, is, man, I think we should have an episode dedicated to this secondary streams of income. I want to learn from you, Yuresh, right?
Yes,
So we should definitely have an episode for that.
that's a
It's
good
actually
topic to
interesting.
have.
One of my closest friends, like you guys know him very well too. Like his story was basically he worked for like one of the biggest companies in the world, right? It used to be like the number one workplace like in the US, and he was part of like this massive group, pretty significant group. And one day the company decided to shut down that entire group, right? So they got pretty much redundant, like the entire group of people. And he did not have like any backup plan at the time, because like nobody saw it coming, basically. So while he was basically looking for like other opportunities, he started getting into doing investments, playing with the stock market and various other things. Then eventually started doing two different part-time jobs, and like kind of started building those parallel kind of income sources. And now like when I talk to him like recently, he's like, I don't think I can ever go back to just doing like one thing anymore. He learned it the hard way, but like really found out like the value of it. It's basically at the end of the day, it's a peace of mind. So I know that like Roshan, to your point, like we should definitely do like a different episode on this, since this is not our topic for the day. But I think yeah, we that was a good round. So we basically talked about the feeling of like being stuck, signs of what's a good time to like make a change, lateral versus upward moves, and along with like some radical career moves, real life stories and lessons of our own. So with that, I think we can wrap up. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks everyone for listening in. All right. See you soon. Bye.
All right.